Hello, it's Miss Mason, reading Chapter 2 of Counting by Sevens by Holly Goldberg Sloan. Chapter 2. 2 months ago. I'm about to start a new school. I'm an only child. I'm adopted. And I'm different. That's not strange. But I know it, and that takes the edge off. At least for me. Is it possible to be loved too much? My? Two? Parents? Really? Truly? L-O-V-E, love me. I think waiting a long time for something makes it more gratifying. The correlation between expectation and delivery of desire could no doubt be quantified into some kind of mathematical formula. But that's off the point, which is one of my problems, and why, despite the fact that I'm a thinker, I'm never the teacher's pet. Ever. Right now I'm going to stick to the facts. For 7 years, my mom tried to get pregnant. That seems like a long time of working at something, since the medical definition of infertility is 12 months of well-timed physical union without any results. And while I have a passion for all things medical, the idea of them doing that, especially with any kind of regularity and enthusiasm, makes me feel nauseated. As medically defined, an unpleasant sensation in the abdomen. Twice in those years my mom peed on a plastic wand and turned the diagnostic instrument blue. But twice she couldn't keep the fetus. How onomatopoetic is that word? Fetus. Insane. Her cake failed to bake. And that's how I came into the mix. On the 7th day of the 7th month, is it any wonder I love the number? My new parents drove north to a hospital 257 miles from their home, where they named me after a cold climate tree and changed the world. Or at least our world. Time out. It probably wasn't 257 miles, but that's how I need to think of it. 2 plus 5 equals 7. And 257 is a prime number. Super special. There is order in my universe. Back to adoption day. As my dad explains it, I never once cried, but my mom did all the way down Interstate 5 South until exit 17B. My mom weeps when she's happy. When she's sad, she's just quiet. I believe that her emotional wiring got crossed in this area. We deal with it because most of the time she's smiling, very wide. When my two new parents finally made it to our single-story stucco house in a development at the end of South Joaquin Valley, their nerves were both shot, and our family adventure had just begun. I think it's important to get pictures of things in your head, even if they're wrong, and they pretty much always are. If you could see me, you would say I don't fit into an easily identifiable ethnic category. I'm what's called a person of color, and my parents are not. They are two of the whitest white people in the world, no exaggeration. They are so white they're almost blue. They don't have circulation problems, they just don't have much pigment. My mom has fine red hair and eyes that are pale, pale, pale blue. So pale they look gray, which they are not. My dad is tall and pretty much bald. He has seborrheic dermatitis, which means that his skin appears to be constantly in a state of rash. This has led to a great deal of observation and research on my part, but for him it's no picnic. If you are now picturing this trio and considering us together, I want you to know that while I don't in any way resemble my parents, somehow we would just naturally look like a family. At least I think so. And that's all that really matters. Besides the number 7, I have two other major obsessions: medical conditions and plants. By medical conditions, I mean human disease. I study myself, of course, but my illnesses have been minor and not life-threatening. I do observe and chronicle my mom and dad, but they will not let me do much diagnostic work on their behalf. The only reason that I regularly leave the house, not counting going to the forced prison camp also known as middle school, and my weekly trip to the central library, is to observe sickness in the general population. It would always be my first choice to sit for several hours every day in a hospital, but it turns out that nursing staffs have a problem with that, even if you just camped out in the waiting room pretending to read a book. So I visit the local shopping mall, which fortunately has its share of disease, but I don't buy things. Since I was little, I've kept field notes and made diagnostic flashcards. I am particularly drawn to skin disorders, which I photograph only if the subject, and one of my parents, isn't looking. My second interest, plants. They are living, growing, reproducing, pushing and pulling in the ground all around us at all times. We accept that without even noticing. Open your eyes, people. This is amazing. If plants made sounds, it would all be different. But they communicate with color and shape and size and texture. They don't meow or bark or tweet. We think they don't have eyes, but they see the angle of the sun and the rise of the moon. They don't just feel the wind, they change directions because of it. Before you think I'm crazy, which is always a possibility, look outside, right now. I'm hoping that your view isn't of a parking lot or the side of a building. I'm imagining you see a tall tree with delicate leaves. You catch sight of the swaying grass in a wide field, weeds pushing up through a crack in the sidewalk or in the distance somewhere. We are surrounded. I'm asking you to pay attention in a new way and view it all as being alive with a capital A. My hometown, like a lot of the Central Valley of California, has a desert climate and is flat and dry and very hot for over half of the year. Since I've never lived anywhere else, whole months of days where it's 100 degrees outside seems normal. We call it summer. Despite the heat, there is no escaping the fact that the bright sun and rich soil make the area ideal for growing things once you add water to the equation. And I did. So where once our house had a rectangle of grass, there is now a 40-foot high stand of timber bamboo. I have citron trees, orange, grapefruit, and lime, next to my year-round vegetable garden. I grow grapes, a variety of vines, annual and perennial flowers, and in one small area, tropical plants. To know me is to know my garden. It is my sanctuary. It's sort of tragic that we can't remember the earliest of the early years. I feel as if these memories could be the key to the whole "who am I" question. What was my first nightmare about? How did the first step really feel? What was the decision-making process when it came time to ditch the diapers? I've got some toddler memories, but my first sequence to recall is kindergarten, no matter how hard I've tried to forget the experience. My parents said the place was going to be all kinds of fun. It wasn't. The school was only blocks from our house, and it was here that I first committed the crime of questioning the system. The instructor, Mrs. King, had just plowed her way through a popular picture book. It featured the hallmarks of most preschool literature: repetition, some kind of annoying rhyming, and bold-faced scientific lies. I remember Mrs. King asking the class, "How did this book make you feel?" The appropriate answer, as far as she was concerned, was tired, because the overly cheery instructor forced us to lie down on sticky rubber mats for 20 minutes after lunchtime picture book. Half of the class usually fell deeply asleep. I remember distinctly a boy named Miles twice peeing in his pants, and, with the exception of a kid named Garrison, who I'm certain had some sort of restless leg syndrome, everyone else in the room seemed to actually enjoy the horizontal break. What were these kids thinking? The first week while my classmates dozed off, I obsessively worried about the hygiene of the linoleum floor. I can still hear Mrs. King, spine straight and shrill voice booming, "How does this book make you feel?" She then made a few exaggerated yawns. I recall looking around at my fellow inmates thinking, would someone, anyone, just shout out the word "tired"? I had not uttered a single syllable in my 5 sessions as a student, and I had no intention of doing so. But after days of hearing more lies from an adult than I'd been exposed to in my whole lifetime, everything from how fairies cleaned up the classroom at night to insane explanations for earthquakes preparedness kits, I was at some kind of breaking point. So, when the teacher specifically said, "Willow, how does this book make you feel?" I had to tell the truth. It makes me feel really bad. The moon can't hear someone say good night. It is 235,000 miles away. And bunnies don't live in houses. Also, I don't think the artwork is very interesting. I bit my lower lip and experienced the metallic taste of blood. But really, hearing you read the book makes me feel bad mostly because I know it means you're going to make us lie down on the floor. And germs there could make us sick. There's a thing called salmonella, and it's very dangerous, especially to kids. That afternoon, I learned the word weirdo, because that's what I was called by the other kids. When my mom came to pick me up, she found me crying behind the dumpster in the play yard. I was taken to see an educational consultant that autumn, and the woman did an evaluation. She sent my parents a letter. I read it. It said I was highly gifted. Are people lowly gifted? Or medium gifted? Or just gifted? It's possible that all labels are curses, unless they're on cleaning products. Because, in my opinion, it's not really a great idea to see people as one thing. Every person has lots of ingredients to make them into what is always a one-of-a-kind creation. We are all imperfect genetic stews. According to the consultant, Mrs. Grace V. Merman, the challenge for the parents of someone highly gifted was to find ways to keep the child engaged and stimulated. But I think she was wrong. Almost everything interests me. I can be engaged by the arc of the water in a sprinkler system. I can look through a microscope for a shockingly long period of time. The challenge for my parents was going to be to find friends who could put up with such a person. All of this leads to our garden. Mom and Dad said they were looking to enrich my life, but I think one thing was obvious in the beginning. Plants can't talk back.